Okay, good afternoon to everyone. So I promise that I will not take my more than 30 minutes, so I am watching with my mobile so that I really do not step into, but that cannot be because it is 15 minutes late. In my presentation, there are a couple of slides, there are a couple of clips which I wanted to share with you. What I plan now, I first make my presentation, and then at the end, if I can save some 4 or 5 minutes time, then I will go back, I will not take much time, because once I go for those things, we may digress to another direction. Those who know me, I think most of you know me, I worked for a very long number of years, first as engineering librarian, and then as a business school librarian. Then about a year and little more than a year back, I switched over to this position. So what I'm going to present here, it is kind of journey that I have gone through for last 1 year, and I'm still going through in search of an answer that what is the future of scholarly communication service in library. And I am taking as a kind of given that scholarly communication is an area that has to be. We are not questioning that part, then there will be no end to it. As I said, that I may skip some presentation or may skip some of the points in the presentation, but overall I think I'll be able to manage so on. So scholarly communications, I mean the term came long back. I mean Borgman's definition was there. It is a kind of the way scholarly communications are produced. That is way back in 1990. But when we talk now, this definition has been prepared by Association of Research Libraries, and they say that it is the system through which the research and other scholarly writings are created, evaluated, disseminated, and it also includes both formal and informal meaning. So any kind of scholarly communication service, when we keep thinking, we have to remember that it is the system that facilitates, not actually how the author is creating. That is not really the focus of scholarly communication. So to understand that, who are there in the environment, let us see who are there. At the core, there is a researcher. He should be ideally at the core because he produces communication, and surrounding him there are funding agencies who facilitate research. There are universities or evaluators. So they say evaluator, they can be universities, they can be funding agencies who reward the researcher with more fund, tenure, etc. Then there are community. That is another point we will talk little later, but so far probably we think community is another researcher who reads the paper. And there are publishers. So with this structure, this is the ideal structure should have been, but there are certain tensions and anomalies. That is, public fund is in the hand of funding agencies, but the entire business term so far has been controlled by publishers. And evaluators, those who have to reward the authors or researchers, they were always in search of a number that they can attach with the paper or research. Can I give this research paper 8 or 2, and based on that the reward is to be given. The author is pushed outside. He is outside there, and he has a kind of, this kind of, the funding agency depends on publisher. Publishers are manipulating evaluation metrics, mostly journal impact factor, and then evaluators are depend. It is a structure that has been built many years. This is in social science term, it is called structuration theory. Everyone is doing the same thing round and round, and so the structure has been formed, and this author, he is actually also contributing. He has a tension, he wants credit, he is going to funding agencies, so he is trying to publish, which is a high impact factor journal or those kind of thing, trying to collect citation count. But he also needs more, recognition for community. So he is in a tension to which side to go. So with this thing, the missing from the scenario has been, so far, at least a couple of years back, the basic question, what is the nature of information? Is it a public good or it's a private good? What does it mean by access, and what is the diversity? When I talk of diversity, diversity means voice of everyone. Those who are familiar with some kind of digital collection, historical collection, they know that voice of marginalities are also coming, they don't consider. So even it happens research, social science, some of the theories, some of the presentation can be suppressed because there is no forum, there is no journal to publish it. Broad sense of scholarly contribution. Is it that only a journal article is a scholarly contribution, or there can be some other contributions. Value of the content, what does it mean? And also, many of the stakeholders are actually taken out of the community, such as citizens, policymakers, researchers from geographical areas who cannot afford expensive literature. So they were all out of the community. The communities considered only those researchers who could buy and who could afford to buy and go through those literature. So things started changing almost about beginning of this century. I have given the title this slide, Changing the Narrative. This year ACRL's annual conference has a title, Recasting the Narrative. So I really like that one, but I cannot just copy it because of copyright violation kind of thing. So, but the changing of narrative started changing from almost 2000. I have picked up some big pictures. These are not exhaustive, and I'll just walk you through some of these big pictures, what has happened or what is happening. Open access advocacy first came. It is really a precursor, so I don't have to tell because it is a librarians forum. I don't have to say what about it. It has been successful to create a pitch. I mean, it is people now, pitch means, it has become a part of conversation of even researchers. People do not say kind of what is open access, people don't ask that way. There are two major outcomes. One is self-archiving institutional repositories. Another trend is open access journal. Each has its own problem that we will discuss little later, but there are lots of challenges because none of the models have been found very successful. Other thing happened first in 2003 by National Institute of Health, then it was followed by National Science Foundation, and then followed by more and more funding agencies. They made it mandatory that any research funded by them, the output must be published in open. Okay, let us be very careful about the term they are saying. The articles that are published in peer-reviewed journals must be made public within 9 to 12 months. So they are also talking of peer-reviewed journal publication that has to be deposited in an archive. NSF went ahead and they made in 2013 mandatory that research data must also be submitted to data repository, and data management plan should be given for long-term access to those data. And very recently, I'm sure many of you have noticed through email listserv that European agencies, they have gone a little further. Their plan is for by 2020, everything funded by any state funding agency must be deposited in a repository or must be published in an open access journal. And they have excluded those journals which accepts article processing charge or APC. Parallelly, in 2012, something started called Declaration of Research Assessment. It is called DORA or S-DORA because it started in San Francisco by some biologists. And they have made a kind of declaration that is the content of a research output is the only important criteria, which means the journal impact factor should not be equated with the quality of an article. They expanded the scope of scholarly communication. They said there are various forms of research output, data, software, intellectual properties, all of which must be recognized as a scholarly communication output. And as they said, metrics like journal impact factor does not look into the merit of the article, should not be considered. In fact, they have given a call to various communities. The declaration is available on their site, to funding agencies, to publishers, to community, to researchers, all stakeholders to do their best to change the existing scenario. And Leiden Manifesto came in 2015. They are almost same, but look at the underlined 3 lines. They started saying that it is not only the research output, keep data collection and analytical process open, transparent and simple. And also they asked the account for the variation in the field of publication, the way science reports are cited, science papers are cited, social science papers may not be cited or history papers may not be cited. Journals may not be at all a kind of research scholar output in some of the area. So you have to consider the variation in the field of publication and citation practices and recognize the systemic effects of assessment and indicators, how it is going to really help that kind of assessment. And later, very recently, what it is called Open Science Framework. Their goal is they're saying that research, this is the basic thing. What is done research, that always should be challenged and that should be made open. So research should be, purpose is it should be use and reuse and reproducibility of research. So research protocol and data must be open for examination. There should be transparency in description and adequate metadata. So it is not that just I submitted data chunk in a repository. The data dictionary should be very clear to say what is that data about. In fact, I was talking to a biomedical scientist a couple of weeks back. He said that not only he considers that data, he also, because they use a lot of X-ray spectrometry and other thing. They say how you hold the machine, that also matters, because depending on how you are holding the machine, data may vary. So we are considering, he said we are considering even to make a video of when the experiment goes on to show how exactly the instrument should be held to collect data. So they are considering even that as a data. And also the implication or impact of research for broader society that need to be established. So achievement, Open Science Framework says that achievement is increased visibility of research and not necessarily by journal article. There are all kind of frames they are giving. One can interpret how this can be, how various things can be included. More participation and collaboration from community members, and reduce duplication, and more important, enhance societal benefit. Let me give one example of simple societal benefit and community. Of course, he is a very famous economics professor. He was with IIM Calcutta. He wrote a book way back in late 90s or beginning of this century, that WTO and India's pharmaceutical industry. And probably you remember there is a case where Novartis AG and the Supreme Court judge quoted from his book that, judge took the decision based on his book. So many people write a book. How many books are considered in real life the value of what he has written? This is called societal benefit or getting engaged by community members. So open science has actually, this is their framework. They say from hypothesis to data collection, processing, storing, publication, and use, keep everything open. Make as much as use of open source software, keep the metadata descriptive, and also allow others to use it. And of course, there are other components like open access, making that there, but they again and again they are saying publish metadata with open license and allow people to use it. So once this thing has happened, now we'll look at another aspect of peer review. Now why people, journal articles, they are really, scientists or researchers, they are really crazy to publish in the journal. That is because that gives a value, that gives them some position. And why it is that position they give? Because that is called, it's called in philosophical terms certification peer review. Most of the journals are peer reviewed journal, and any researcher who really does research sincerely, he will not hide his research from community members. He would like to see how his research or how his research output is viewed by others. So they really go for that kind of peer reviewing, and that's the where publishers, commercial publishers, journals, because they claim to be peer reviewed journals. But more and more this peer review process there are proofs that is unreliability, there are inconsistency. Peer review causes a delay. I think everyone knows it is a kind of common talk that if you plan to publish something, be ready for 3 years to pass from the day you submit it and the day you see that your article is out. And always publishers say, we have a very small panel, we have a very large pool of papers, so all this process things goes on. And there are social and publication biases. It does not happen in social sciences, it can happen in science. If the journal is dominated by some kind of theoretical belief, the people who are, they can really reject some of the articles which do not really align with their viewpoints. I'll show you if the time is there to look at retraction reports, that how many articles of authors are retracted that has been reported. So the question comes, if the peer review process is completely flawless, how can so many papers go to the journal publication which were retracted later on? Other issues in the current publishing model is speed. As I said, the time spent for research and the time it comes to the public, it takes too much of time. Author, once the paper reach the appropriate group who may be locked out of paywall. There wider peer, authors also need wider peer review. He wants to not only find out who is interested in his research or in her research, but with whom he or she can collaborate in the future. The two major problems in the current publishing model is that they always prefer positive result. Is a failed experiments, if there is a report, publishers will not accept that failed thing. And reproducibility, that is kind of coming forward. Confirmation of research, also there is not really good platform to publish, but these are more and more the demand of the current days. I will skip this one, I will come back later. In the background of this one, what are coming, something called preprint servers and open peer review platforms. We know the preprint servers, probably archive.org, it's well known, it has been established within the community of physics and computational biology and some of the areas. Very recently, about a year back, SciCurve and SawCurve, they started, I mean, the structure was there, they really did not take much interest or whatever it is, but now they have started pushing it. And some of the others, it's called post-publication review, F1000 Research or preprint J. They are saying that you submit your paper first, there will be people who will give the comment. And if I can show you that time is there, you can see how people are responsibly giving the review and ultimately certifying whether the author has really included his comments or not. And there is no double blind, everybody has to disclose their identity. It seems that some journals have started publishing along with the article, the peer review comments also the article received. There was certain kind of apprehension that publishers may not accept an article if it is submitted to a preprint server. I don't want to take the name because it's a professional forum, but I have seen at least 2 journals, reputed journals, which they say that submission to a availability of a paper in a preprint server should not be a disqualifier for submission. They do not say that it is guaranteed, but they say that is not a disqualification. And there is a call now even from the researcher community that if you find that submitting to a preprint server, your journal is not accepting, better don't care for the journal, don't go for submission. And this comment is given by one sociology professor, Professor Cohen from University of Maryland. So these are some of the alternate modes and alternate platforms are coming forward. As I said, F1000 Research is also one of them. It seems that the platforms are still, they have to come. Mr. Breding mentioned that institutional repositories are not that successful because people will not go repository to repository. But physics people definitely go to archive.org. And similarly, if the SciCurve or SawCurve or this kind of disciplinary repositories come up, then that will be another way of looking that self-archiving models become successful. The basic thing is that now philosophy is open. These are 5 stages that are generally called in the basic by Robert Merton has written. Registration, which is actually right now limited to journal submission, but it is expanding in scope, starting at an early stage of research project and diversifying, not only limited to articles. Certification, which is so far considered only peer reviewing, that is becoming community centric. If it is a post-publication review per platform or preprint servers are considered, then that is a forum where community can participate in reviewing process. Dissemination, preservation, definitely, and evaluation, of course, evaluation different from citation based and journal metric based evaluation. It still has to come, but these are the challenges. So if we look at the trajectory, when we started about talking about open access way back in 2000, that time the consideration was economy, but it has now moved to transparency and inclusiveness. Whereas if I told you that the funding agency said the peer review journal articles published in peer review must be submitted to a repository, which means still at even 10 years back, the consideration was the ultimate result, that is published result. But from that, it is now pulling back that entire examination, entire process of research should be under examination. So that now the scholarly communication is standing that way, that communication has to be transparent, it should be inclusive, and it should be examination right from the beginning. Which obviously mentions that scholarly communication is not limited to the journal article. It can be a piece of data, it can be how you create a metadata, or it will be research protocol. Of course, there are challenges, because if there is not challenges, then we will not be here. So we are always here to manage challenges. Open access publishing has its own challenges. Some of the funding agencies started providing APC charges, but what they found that even with that APC charges, researchers are flocking along the more commercial publications who publish your article if you pay APC charge. And most of the fund is going to that section. Self-archiving, there are quite a good number of studies which shows that time, motivation, etc. are factors, and it is not really a very successful thing, and which I have noticed it is not only time and motivation. If there is a conflict of workflow of scientist or researcher with a piece that I bring, scientist or researcher will not disturb its workflow. So if it is an deposit to an institutional repository, create additional workload and is not really integrated into his workflow, that is bound to fail. Then still there are challenges because perception of reward system, what is reward? If I publish in a high impact factor journal, that is a good reward. That conception is still there among the researchers, so that is also a challenge. And of course, as you said, that a platform neutral and inclusive metric is yet to come, but good thing is that people started talking. So within this thing, how libraries are coming forward. So I tried to look at it from 4 points. What is that? What kind of questions that are asked when we talk about scholarly communication services? What kind of job specification and positions are there? Are there really exclusive job positions and job specification? What kind of delivery models are there, and how the learning is taking place to provide this service? So one thing is there that library is that the librarians are at the center of whatever things are happening, but librarians are not central to the problem. So even that take out the librarian, these things will happen. But it happens that we are at the center. The researcher who will never care to ask about what is a predatory journal, only when he gets some kind of alarm, he thinks, oh, journal, so librarian may be of help. So only then the things started ticking in them. So we are not really central. But still, because we are at the center, we can really have a lot of scope to intervene in the future. I have looked at this study Fluency conducted in 2017. She collected data from both UK and US library, and some findings are there, so I'll discuss it. But before that, these are the things she found that when people think of scholarly communication service, forget about the brand name scholarly communication, but these are all the areas the question comes or people expect their support. It starts from outreach and education, from author's right, and to look at the bottom, the data management or data curation. And each can be expanded quite a lot. I mean, from each, take anything and you can find another stream of 10 or 12 services that you can provide. So when I started about little more than a year back, I found there are pretty number of dots, but how to connect, where to start. And it happens for any scholarly communication librarian. Where do I start and how do I connect? Should I start with copyright? Should I go with mandates? This is the time when a librarian has to take a decision to understand her or his bandwidth and the support, and then start not everything, maybe probably start one after the another. But this is a challenge of the librarian, that how to connect all the dots. Suppose people are talking about data repository, then come, how can I create a data which I give open license? Then how do I save my data? Somebody was questioning, how do I save my data? The answer is that take a DOI. Then how do I go for a DOI? It just opens one after another layer of questions. So what is happening, whether there is a name or not, originally even now the scope of the positions, sometimes they are specific positions, sometimes they are distributed. But by the year 2005 or 6, job positions like scholarly communication started coming in both Europe and US. And it continued for many years and then started gradually diversifying. Now you can find in the job position data librarian or research data management librarian, or a position or a job description research data management. That may be a responsibility of scholarly communication librarian, but it is coming in the job specification, digital scholarship, digital humanities. So newer positions may be there, but sometimes they are very collaborative. Many places I have seen the collection development librarian, they are managing some part of a scholarly communication librarian. So there are now in the vocabulary that scholarly communication job is not just a kind of add-on jobs. It requires proper timing, in-depth research, and also working. So that either by position or by description, this is coming forward. What kind of service design model help? There is no answer to it. This is, I have taken one as an example. This author was studying the failure of IR development, but I think these 4 reasons, 4 models are applicable to any kind of scholarly communication services. The first model is if you build it, they will come. So people built it, but people did not come. Institutional repositories were created, but after the initial enthusiasm, they were not really uploading. To make depositing fun, I have seen many places people are trying, for example, to promote ORCID user identifier, create sometimes a marathon kind of thing, but people create in the marathon, they get the prize, but they don't use it later on. So in the really useful sense, people don't use those things. To some extent, mandate by organization helps, so that's how, public, NIH and NSF have been successful, but again, mandates, it is, if we want to develop a culture, mandate should not be considered as a thing. Mandate, people do it out of fear. And I have probably organizations really do not want to come very hard on their researchers if they do not deposit their article in their institutional repository. Libraries try to provide services, to provide more technical support, more pre-preservation service or metadata service. Again, none of the models worked. Fruin's study made a kind of study, and I have found from her study that these 2 models clearly emerges. I have named it, one is UK model and another is US model, because she collected data from these 2 continents. If you go by UK model, the issues are more organizational priority. I think we have here some people from Europe, they can substantiate. Scholarly communication is not a librarian's responsibility to promote. Because it comes with an organizational priority, the partnership, libraries are making partnership with research administration, they are developing team, and the job is distributed, sharing with that, and because of that, even librarians' capability become more visible. And because it is from research administration, the workflow is generated in that way that researchers are not really overloaded with one more pieces. And more library-centric models are like responsibility of 1 or 2 individuals. So what they do, they stress more on user education, because one person, how much one can do. So they stress more on user education, and if you go with user education, it's difficult to educate users unless they are in real problem, because users are always having lots and lots of information overload. So they will pay attention to that information which is immediate concern, not in the future. Trends are changing though. There was a Figshare, you can find this presentation, there is a road show of ORCID United States organization, the United States universities who have taken ORCID institutional membership. So 4 successful case studies was presented here. North Carolina Chapel Hill, it is very recent, their Office of Research, they subscribe to ORCID membership and then call library to partner for promotion of that, because they believe that library people are in a position who can advocate, who have the knowledge of users' requirement, and they know how to provide instruction to group like researchers. So this is the first one I have seen in the US where the research administration office is coming forward and calling library to help. Most probably this is going to change in next few years. So service designing and delivery, these are big challenges. What should be a content? If I want to talk about copyright, what should be the content? What should be the format? The challenge is the venue. Where should I get my users? If I go and give a workshop in my library, people will not come. So be strategic. and always look for where there are more number of users, more number of new faculty are getting together. Maybe new faculty orientation, maybe in their tenure and promotion workshop, where they come and tie up with those kind of office and ask them to give a platform. That works much better. So strategic partnership with campus units are a much better solution. And always look for opportunity, like that's how digital humanities is coming. Libraries are ready with their now data management experience. They can take that knowledge even to extract data in the humanities area and support. So they are coming forward and tying up with digital humanities scholar and building up service. And this service and even the scholarly communication service needs lots of collaboration within that one. If you are suggesting users how to make your data dictionary, you need really help from metadata. That may not be, I may not be an expert on metadata, so I may have to depend on my colleague who is a metadata expert. Or I may have to call my subject liaison to tell that if I have to design service for this particular group, what is the characteristics of the subject? What do you think the users need more? So those kind of internal it is not a one person's show, it is a collaborative even within the organization. Learning, no library school so far has offered a coursework on scholarly communication. The reason, of course, I think because the field is so, so expanding, confusing, it's probably difficult to design a course. So most of us, we are learning on the job, and there are really very, very highly collaborative groups are there who are exposing whatever they're doing, best practices, their success, their failure. When I call, you can pick up a phone and ask them, I have this problem, how did you, and they don't feel ashamed to say that I didn't find a solution, it is also a problem for me. So okay, it's a problematic area, and this collaborative learning has to go for quite some time. So path, if I look, I cannot be a future fortune teller or future teller, what is going to happen? Based on this, what I am looking, I mentioned about this report came when I was preparing for this seminar only in January. Now whatever we are talking about expansiveness, openness, now it has got a formal recommendation by an expert group to European Commission, who are asking the same thing, that area of scholarly communication will grow more complex and fluid, and they are calling for openness, they are calling to decrease the time between the information created, it's discovered and accessed. So probably the best strategy for future will be to make continuous environment scan, find out what the model that can work better. Collaboration is definitely a better solution, and also always understand the workflow of both the users and whatever I am bringing. And I am always in favor of removing the mismatch in favoring the users, because it is their work, so their workflows you have to see how it is integrated. And also collaborative learning. Now let me quickly take you to some of the clips, can help me. Just terminate it and bring that. Terminate it and open that, not this one. Okay, wait. So this is the retraction watch, what I was talking about. You look at it, I just took this copy a couple of days before this presentation. So they're showing that, how many papers, total retractions of an author it can happen. And the list is pretty long if you go there. That question comes, if peer review is watertight, how those papers could, and you'll be surprised to see some of the journals that are listed. They are very famous chemistry journals I have seen from where retraction has happened. And okay, so let us listen to this clip. This is a call one researcher. She tried conventional journals with a tenure standing on her neck, and how she recovered from the situation with the help of PsyCurve.
As we talk theoretically, I wanted to bring this down into more of a concrete space, and I really like the example of Dr. Nordman. She's an instructor at Aberdeen, and she has, I think, a really nice story about her experience as a new and then early career researcher, sort of trying the traditional path and then jumping into PsyArchive as well. Don't worry about reading this tiny text. I'll sort of talk you through it a little bit, but I wanted to show her face because she's, I think, doing great stuff and provides us a really good example. So the gist of this great story in 6 acts is that in March of 2017, she finishes some research she's very proud of. She's an early career researcher. It's going to be important for her promotion and tenure package. And she feels like she's done the methodology really well. She submits it to a very prestigious journal, TM. And they basically say, this is good. It's not, doesn't really rise to the level of the sort of thing we publish. So a month later, she has done her work and shared it and gotten some useful feedback. She then submits it to a smaller but still fairly prestigious journal, and she waits 6 months, and then she finally hears back, and basically what she hears back from the reviewers are, this is a great research, you've done strong foundational work here, it's not novel enough for us to publish, so good luck to you. And her response, as you can see in the sort of all caps on the left there, is, this is what's wrong with science. You could have told me that 6 months ago. You just needed to read my abstract, right? So she's got the tenure clock hanging over her head. Time is absolutely of the essence, and she's already been half a year and not really gotten anything out of it so far. So she keeps going. In October of 2017, she submits to another small sort of prestigious journal. She waits for 2 months. She reaches out again and says, hi, I'd really like to move this forward. And their response is, sorry, we haven't even assigned an editor yet. It's going to be another 3 months before we can even find an editor. And then they're going to have to find the reviewers and move it out. So it could be a little while. And she uses some not safe for work language here in the top middle slide, but basically she says, this is going nowhere. This is hugely frustrating. I'm not getting good feedback on my work. I'm not sharing my work. I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to try out this preprint server and see how that goes for me. And very quickly, by January of that year, she's been invited to advise on a paper, which becomes a review article, which she quite properly also then submits to SciArchive as well. She's invited to present at a conference based on the preprint that people have seen. At that conference, she meets a collaborator and she starts a new paper, which is again submitted to SciArchive. And then by July of this year, she's offered a lectureship. She's got a full-time position.
Okay, so this is the kind of agony that new researchers have to go, particularly those researchers who are at the very beginning of their career. And the last one, which I will show here, that F1000 research publication. This is the paper has been published, they submitted, and then look at this. How many people have said? There are 4 people there looked at the first version. Let us look at what kind of comments came. And when it is published, all the reviewers comment. The identity is clearly said. It is no double blind. No one knows who actually reviewed. The name is given. And then when the second time it was author revised, then again she is saying whether the author has agreed to his version or not. So basically it is not only the result is open for criticism or examination, it is even the reviewers' comments are also open for criticism. So that's how that future of scholarly communication is going to that kind of direction. And the challenges are of course there, because how to tell, I mean, even when I went there, after listening to this SciCurve and SawCurve webinar, the next time I had a very favorite group in School of Education, and I told about this SawCurve, they just raised their eyebrow, can we do that? So they didn't even know, should we do that? I said, okay, then go and talk to your faculty and say how you are as a beginner of career, how you are going to establish, how you are going to show what you are doing. So that's all.